Let us explore meditation's best benefits. This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. A question that begins, staying focused, and then continues. I've been off and on with meditation for a while now, and I feel myself about to get back into the flow of it. As I look back on my previous journey with meditation, I seem to forget the points. I feel like I understand concentrating on your breathing, but what does that even mean? Am I supposed to concentrate on the air molecules going through my body, or what? Haha, LOL. I have a tough time understanding how to get the most benefit for it, or from it, which eventually leads me to stopping it altogether. So I really respect the enthusiasm and of the person who wrote this, as well as their intelligence and their ability to express themselves cogently. Sadly, that's often lacking. So your unawareness of the purpose or benefits of meditation is not your fault. It's not an indictment against you. It is, however, an indictment on the teachings you received and the teachers who gave you those teachings. I feel like you've been cheated. I would like very much to rectify that. So the answers you seek are found in the Buddha's first sermon. I'd like to share that with you from a certain point of view, if that's okay. But to do that, I think I need to explore the setting, or set the circumstance. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. So it should come as little surprise that 90% of meditation teachers sincerely behave and believe that being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel is pretty awesome. And an extreme minority, the outcast teachers, if you will, are the ones who are all about being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Ironically, the author of the Song of Enlightenment from the 6th century considered himself to be an outcast monk. So us outcasts, us freaks, are in good company. So let's get back to these people, those who are rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. This worldview influences both their understanding of the teachings as well as their practice of the teachings, and consequently the results they get from that practice. And to use the vernacular, a lot of their points of view after a while become downright wackadoodle. Consider this. Every Chan practitioner and every Zen practitioner looks back at Bodhidharma, the individual who brought dhyana meditation from India to China, as the first Chinese patriarch of the Chan school. And he was all about, he happily recommended different sutras for his students to read and study. And he was not at all adamant that people needed to have a teacher or a guru or a shifu or a roshi, which was good. But that changed, that mutated. Ever seen a cartoon where they take a small snowball and they roll it downhill and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and becomes an avalanche? Well, over time, the people who are yang, people who are into patriarchy, people who are into being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, love positions of prestige, love positions of authority, and they will insinuate themselves into organizations, claw and scrape away to positions of power, and then change everything. We saw this in the early Buddhist Sangha. The Buddha had a foolish cousin named Devadatta who did just that. He slimed and manipulated his way into popularity. He divided the monks and he divided the laity, and he created his own little group. And he had power and he had prestige and he had wealth, but his teachings didn't help anybody. And so everybody abandoned him, which was quite sad for him. But that's what happens over and over and over again. So people rose to power, and then they said, we don't need scriptures anymore. And all we need is teacher. And that happened over and over and over again. And people became so confused that in this day and age, there are contemporary Zen Roshis who sincerely espouse that meditation is good for nothing. Now, a few of them might mean that figuratively, but so many of them are so dull and thick that they view it literally. In the second to the final passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha promised that by applying his technique, one could accomplish enlightenment, mastery of the Eightfold Path, in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. Meanwhile, you got people on the wackadoodle path who are practicing for dozens and dozens and dozens of years, and they still don't know what enlightenment is, no less if they've accomplished it or not. But they sure are enthusiastic about their teachers, living or dead. So these are the wackadoodles, and these are the people who have seized the levers of power and popularity and prestige, and these are the names by which people conjure, metaphorically speaking, and we wind up with intelligent, articulate, and sincere people who don't know what meditation is or how to do it. So, having said that, let's go to the outline of the Buddha's original lesson. We begin with the first point is stressors. There are stressors. There's some people who say, nope, there's no stressors. Everything's perfect all the time. What about plagues? Everything's perfect. What about birth defects? Everything's perfect. What about, domestic violence? Everything's perfect. Perfect. That reminds me of the Colbert Report, when Stephen Colbert said, this just in, I had lunch, therefore world hunger is over. So ask a biologist. They will tell you, yes, there are stressors. Some are circumstantial, some are physical, some are interpersonal, and some are mental. We have evolved the capacity to both perceive stress and react to it dynamically as a survival mechanism. And this survival mechanism, although at times inconvenient, has helped us survive. Think about it. Humans are not the fastest. We're not the strongest. We are not sharp of claw nor long of fang. And yet, as a species, we are pretty much prevailing on this planet. One of the ways we do that is because we're able to perceive stress and respond to stress dynamically. Enter neuroscience. In our underbrain, we have not one, but 2 reward systems. The first one is dopamine-oriented, and it rewards with pleasure, short-term pleasure, for procreating or doing things that support procreation. Drinking water when you're thirsty, eating food when you're hungry, resting when you're tired, finding shade when you're hot, finding warmth when you're cold. These things give us a primal, visceral, short-term pleasure, which is exactly what they were designed to do. what they evolved to do. But there's a second, what's it called? There's a second reward system, and it is oxytocin oriented, and it rewards with a sense of fulfillment every act of cooperation. And that fulfillment is not short term, but long term. And those things also support our survival as a species. It's been said that some of the reasons we survived and thrived as a species is because we can think and we can communicate and we can cooperate. It has been reasoned that the Neanderthals had bigger brains than us, but they didn't have speech. They couldn't communicate what they learned. Everybody had to start from scratch. Whereas with Homo sapiens sapien, we're able to copy off someone's paper and learn from those who come before us. Hey, Jared, how you doing? Why, thank you very much. So let's continue. The primal drives. So in polite society, we might say that our dopamine-oriented drives are to shove at some things and reach for other things and cling to yet others. A more elaborate version would be the 6 F's. According to our dopamine-oriented reward system, whenever we encounter something new or someone new, on some deep level, we're asking 6 questions in rapid fire. And here are the 6 questions. Hey, that person, should I fuck them? Should I feed on them? Should I fight them? Should I flee from them? Should I faint before them? Should I fawn over them? These are primary survival drives, but they're not terribly fulfilling. So, here's where things get interesting. When these survival drives when our central nervous system treats these survival drives as a tool, everything's fine. But when our body gets confused and treats these primal survival drives as a tyrant, then everything gets out of whack. We can't cooperate, and we have no fulfillment in our lives. Yes, short-term pleasure, no long-term fulfillment. Everything's out of balance. So the liberation that the Buddha offers us is not liberation from the presence of the tools of our survival drives, but from their tyranny over our choices, utterances, and deeds. So what is the mechanism by which we seize this liberation? And that is the Eightfold Path. We start off practicing the path, and eventually we master it, and that's enlightenment. When we are so good at the Eightfold Path that we practice it spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively, don't be surprised when people refer to you as liberated. So that's fine and dandy. How does mindfulness and meditation fit into this? Well, they are the final 2 components of the Eightfold Path. So oddly, because I'm a weirdo, I like to teach, when I teach the Eightfold Path, I teach it beginning with the 7th fold and the 8th fold. So here's an overview. Here's is a spoiler alert, if you will. When we practice mindfulness and meditation correctly, and that's a great big if, and don't worry, I'm going to explain what that means in a few minutes. But when we practice mindfulness and meditation correctly, they are so dynamic that they cause the remaining 6 folds of the path to generate spontaneously. And we'll explore that in just a few minutes. I'm just giving you a heads up. So by practicing mindfulness and meditation correctly, we unleash a can of whoop-ass. 50% of this Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness. That's huge. 50%. The highest loving kindness is spontaneous and uncontrived. It is not the product of concentration. It's not the product of analysis. It is the fringe benefit of a healthy practice of mindfulness and meditation. A byproduct of this love is that it can help our choices, utterances, and deeds to flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. And this is what some people describe as effortless effort, the sixth fold of the path. Sitting in mindfulness, we cannot help but notice things changing left and right. That which we see, hear, feel, taste, and smell are always shifting, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. Our emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings always shifting and swirling like a great bubbling stew. Like grandma's bubbling stew. Make the realization of impermanence an inevitability. We can try hard not to perceive impermanence and fail. We can fail our way to enlightenment. How weird is that? So, the proper practice of mindfulness and meditation make the mastery, not just the experience, but the mastery of the remaining six folds of the Eightfold Path effortless. So, if your mouth is a little bit watering and you're kind of interested now in this whole mindfulness and meditation thing, I would love to explore that with you. So we're going to start with our friends, the wackadoodles. Those who are rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel implore their students to practice active concentration and active analysis. They even give them fancy terms like samatha and vipassana. Well, what's the problem with that? I'll tell you. The only way to practice active concentration, the only way to practice active analysis, either or both, is to rely upon the specific mechanisms within regions of our brain, such as the medial prefrontal cortex or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now listen, this prefrontal cortex is pretty nifty. If you want to compare, contrast, analyze, calculate, reason, edit, this tool is fabulous. But it's kind of like a Stradivarius. It's excellent, but it's vulnerable. And when we overuse our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala gets stimulated. This little thing, this innocent little nodule. But this thing is the seat of aggression and anxiety. And that will perpetuate rigidity, fear, aggression, controlling tendencies, elitism, being cryptid, and being competitive and being cruel. That will all be fed by this little teeny amygdala, this little pachinko ball of death. Now for some good news. Would you like some good news? Check this out. There are other parts of our central nervous system that are actually optimized, one for mindfulness and the other for meditation. I'd like to share that with you right now. Let's begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access our sympathetic nervous system, located in the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us to perceive in a very special way, to help us perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. So this whole path of yin, this whole path of Gautama, is already hardwired into our sympathetic nervous system. If this little bastard is the key to us being cranky and rigid, this is the key to us being groovy and flexible. But wait, there's more. So this bad boy has evolved to help us perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. It has also evolved to help us to perceive emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. It helps us to perceive entire spectrum of phenomena. Everything from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Now, the sheer volume of that which we could perceive could kind of feel like someone's asking us to take a sip from a fire hose. So, how's about a relief valve? And that's where meditation comes in. Because every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we are accessing our parasympathetic nervous system. This bad boy can be found in both the upper third of our spinal cord as well as the lower third of our spinal cord. This bad boy, this parasympathetic nervous system, has evolved to help us to both physically relax as well as mentally release, which will have us on a completely different spiritual trajectory than the previous, than working with this bad boy right here. Furthermore, the first benefit of this is it calms down the angry and anxious amygdala. Second benefit is that it stimulates our empathetic anterior cingulate gyrus, the seat of love and compassion, the hub of our mirror neurons. This is the key to the highest love, which is spontaneous and uncontrived. This is the key to that which helps our choices, utterances, and deeds to flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. This makes the perception of change an inevitability. The perception of change, not that fuels or fears, but that helps us to be more laid back, viscerally recognizing that change makes of grasping an absurdity. Now, if you're half as clever as I hope you are, you'll probably cross your arms in this point, maybe lift your chin and look down your nose and say, "Hey, Lama Jigme, you oddly dressed fellow." If that's the case, then why aren't I already enlightened? The answer, in a word, is Urkel. Remember, way back in the late 80s and early 90s, Family Matters, there was a character named Urkel who was just as cute as a button, clever and good-hearted, but wow, was that kid clumsy. In Yiddish, we would say, Klutzmeier. So that kid, that good-hearted, clever kid, was always creating chaos, and then when the dust settled, he would whine, "Did I do that?" And that was his catchphrase, and it was really, really cute. It's cute when a character on a sitcom does that. It's not so cute when our brain does that. Due to a quirk of evolution, our brain is so jam-packed full of organelles that it's kind of like the storage facility, the storage space of a hoarder. It's just wild. But we can cut through the din, and here's how that works. What's the most efficient way to practice mindfulness? Simple. Silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during your inhalation, and your brain can't help but begin cooperating with your sympathetic nervous system and perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. But wait, there's more. The most efficient way to practice meditation is to silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, thus facilitating both physical relaxation and mental release, causing our brain to inadvertently cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system, because our brain is not malicious. It's just like Urkel. Clever, good-hearted, clumsy as hell. It's kind of like when you have a computer and your drivers are out of date and it just glitches out. Playing with these one-syllable words silently and mentally in harmony with your breathing keeps our apps up to date. And there you have it. Practice this once every 12 hours and watch what happens. You might say, but what about concentrating on the breath? Well, we see the danger of concentrating, but we're still breathing. So we're going to use our breathing the way a piano student uses a metronome. And when we notice our body spontaneously breathing in, we play with this exercise. When we notice our body spontaneously breathing out, we play with this exercise. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And so if you wanted to, you could do this 5 minutes. Every 12 hours or so, practice this for 5 minutes. The first week, maybe the second week you'll feel like doing it for 10 minutes. Every 12 hours or so. Maybe by the third week you'll feel like doing it for 15 minutes. Maybe by the fourth week you feel like doing it for 20 minutes. Progress gradually, gently, incrementally, patiently, and by the conclusion of the 12th week, sitting for 60 minutes could be breeze the city. But don't take my word for it. Put these teachings to the test in the laboratory of your own body and mind. I think it could be great fun if right now, together as a team, we practiced. After approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping, because YouTube. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism, each school of meditation, so that you will not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So I think it could be great fun to play with the latest iteration of the vast expanse of Diamond Mind, known in Tibetan as Dorje Sampan Namkache, composed in the 6th century, approximately the 6th century, by Prahe Vajra, translated recently by Yeshe Donden, adapted and amplified by this MOOC what sits before you now. Oops, that's the wrong page. Don't I feel silly? Let's try that again. Here we go. That's much better. Oh, won't you please chant the 29th verse with me? Let's do that 3 times. The empty essence is one unstructured, unborn, and the way of the yogi is like the path of a bird in the sky. How then can we suppose that phenomena actually exist? Let's see if we can't demystify this. So, let's begin with the musical question. What do we mean by the essence or the empty essence? Simply this. Many centuries ago, the Nagarjuna, the South Indian Buddhist philosopher, did his best to communicate the Buddha's teachings, and he explained that there are 2 ways to view the world. Conventionally and ultimately. Every time we breathe in, we perceive things. Every time we relax into our exhalation, that which we perceived during our previous inhalation could feel less solid, less permanent, less defining. Now, when we breathe in, everything is really different. But as we relax into our exhalation, everything is of the same flavor from a certain point of view. Everything is less solid, less permanent, less defining. That's it. That's the oneness. Well, what does unborn mean? Simply this. As we relax into our exhalation, that which we perceived during our previous inhalation could feel as non-graspable, as impermanent, and as non-defining as if it had never been born. So humans have, actually not as humans, all complex animals on this planet have evolved to think symbolically, which means for humans who use language, we can't help but take literal statements, transform them into similes, and then transform those into metaphors. May I illustrate? Let's start with a literal statement. John is tenacious. All right. Now the simile. John is as tenacious as a dog with a bone. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? Now let's trim away the fat and transform this into a metaphor. John is a dog with a bone. Now, figuratively, that makes perfect sense. But if you take that literally, that can really change your view of John. Really? John's a dog with a bone? He doesn't wear clothes. He prances about on all fours and strives to sniff the ass of strangers? Man, I don't know about you, but that's frowned upon in polite society. So yes, there are figurative languages found not only in every language, but in every culture, because it's a reflection of the way our brains are structured. And that brings us here to the unstructured. What does this mean? Remember how during our inhalation we are wired to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly? The more we forsake concentration and allow ourselves to notice randomly, the less small our world is, the more vast and open and spacious and expansive it feels. The late Tulku Thondup didn't use the word emptiness, he used the word openness. It blew my furry little mind. Together. The empty essence is one unstructured, unborn. And the way of the yogi is like the path of a bird in the sky. Yes, it's Red Bull that gives you wings, not meditation. You're not going to become like that X-Men character who was an angel who could fly. That's not going to happen. But what does this mean? Well, this is another metaphor. Someone who has mastered this path of mindfulness and meditation is going to have, as I mentioned previously, their choices, utterances, and deeds experience the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. Not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. And so, yes, you can track the footprints of deer in the snow, but you cannot track the footprints of a bird in the sky. Similarly, one who is traversing this path, who really gets it, who has mastered mindfulness and meditation to the point of living from a place of effortless effort, they're going to be unpredictable. Not deliberately, they're just going with the flow. And the flow is remarkably complex. There's entire areas of engineering devoted to fluid dynamics. And it might seem chaotic, but it can be expressed mathematically. So this is a way of reminding us that as a fringe benefit of mindfulness and meditation, we're going to master the flow. Together, final couplet. How then can we suppose that phenomena actually exist? Once again, this is very figurative. What does it mean? As we inhale, our perceptions tend to be very literal. Things appear to be rather solid and permanent, and that they define us and our relationships and our body and our circumstance. And that's valid. But during the exhalation, they seem less that way. And the fact that the dynamics of breathing in and breathing out can so influence our perception makes it that much easier to be a little bit less neurotic, a little bit less rigid, a little bit less controlling. And now let's recite this for our third and final repetition. The empty essence is one unstructured, unborn, and the way of the yogi is like the path of a bird in the sky. How then can we suppose that phenomena actually exist? And now, for an exciting change of pace, let's meditate. Let us begin by finding the great knuckle at the base of our right index finger and gingerly resting it upon the tip of our left index finger, and then resting the two in our lap. Doing this helps subtle energy to gather at our crown. Whether we see it or feel it or not. So let's count our first collection of 144 breaths, which can seem overwhelming until we think of it as 12 sets of 12 reps for my fellow gym rats. Well, how do we count 12 reps on just 4 fingers and 1 thumb? Allow me to demonstrate. During our inhalation, when we're silently and mentally reciting this, we can advance the tip of our right thumb, beginning with the index finger in our first set of creases, then our second set of creases, then our third set of creases, advancing the thumb during each inhalation, making our way to the top of the pinky and to the 12th set of creases. Let's do that together right now. Fabulous. Now, how we're going to count sets of these 12 reps? We'll do that on our left hand, beginning with the first set of creases and the second set of creases and the third set of creases to count our first set of 12 reps, our second set of 12 reps, our third set of 12 reps, working away to the 12th set of 12 reps. Now, is this a little ungainly? Yeah. So play with it once every 12 hours. Suspend judgment for the first fortnight. See if it grows on you. So what do we label with that which we notice? We label it this. What do we do with that which we notice? We ease. Just like that line from Panama. Reach down between my legs and ease the seat back. Having completed our first collection of 144 breaths, in preparation for our second collection, let us chant the 30th verse 3 times. Outer and inner phenomena are both of unreal condition, which is not an object to be grasped by the conceptual mind. The things of this world are men based in mistaken concepts, and so it is we fail to experience the quality of decontemplation. All right. So, obviously, there's a big old difference between dog do and organic free trade chocolate. If you think you're too spiritual to know the difference, I would thank you not to make me dessert. So yes, as we breathe in, those two things seem very, very different, because they are. But as we relax into our exhalation, both chocolate and dog do share the same nature. How's that? Well, they're both seem less solid, seem less permanent, seem less defining. So there is this tendency to divide and say, well, that's good and that's bad. And that's bad, but this is good, but this is better, and that's best. And that might be useful in the world we experience during our inhalation. But we can take a break from that, however short, during our exhalation. And so during the inhalation, we might feel that the inner is better than the outer. But as we relax into our exhalation, they feel like they're the same. Now, this whole idea of the real condition is not something that can be understood through pseudo-intellectual gymnastics, nor through the superstition of blind faith. It's not something that we experience that way. It's something we experience viscerally through the mechanics of breathing and relaxing. We're fond of naming things. One of the things that struck me during high school biology was this. When it comes to photosynthesis, there are many, many mechanisms and sub-mechanisms, and we don't understand them 100%. But even though we don't understand them 100%, we've labeled them. And sometimes labeling is just practical, but sometimes it's a way of exercising or indulging our controlling tendencies. And when we think of the labels, you think of the labels as something provisional. Right now, it might seem useful to label this one way. In the future, when we have more information, we might wish to label it a different way. This is one of the things noticed by young physicists, post-doctrinal physicists. When they entered the path, they thought, well, everyone's going to be free from logical fallacies and cognitive biases, and everyone's going to be pure of heart. And they find that's not the case. And sometimes people who should know better, experts, in the face of overwhelming scientific evidence, will cling to old suppositions, and that gums up the progress of science. And so the young postdoctorals have to wait for the old postdoctorals to either grow up or die off, because they're holding on too tightly onto their mistaken concepts. What is meant by deep contemplation? It's simply this. The equanimity the Buddha spoke of as the seventh enlightenment factor is simply this. Applying the same method to all we perceive. What do we do with something pleasurable? Notice it and release it. Well, what do you do with something painful? Notice it and release it. What do we do with something interesting? Notice it and release it. What do we do with something boring? Notice it and release it. That's the ultimate contemplative equanimity. And so that's the deep contemplation, not getting high on our own supply of neurotransmitters, not falling asleep while sitting up or getting really, and calling it a profound jhana, but by dancing with whatever occurs in our circumstance, body, and mind. And so now that I've explained it, together as a team, let us chant it a third time. Inner and outer phenomena are both of one real condition, which is not an object to be grasped by the conceptual mind. The things of this world are mere names based on mistaken concepts, and so it is we fail to experience the equality of deep contemplation. So this is going to be our last collection of 144 breaths. I don't want to sound scary. Our last contemplation for this evening's live stream. For this evening's live stream has had its share of debacles. So I think it could be Jim Dandy if we find the knuckle, the great knuckle of the base of our right middle finger, and we gingerly set it upon the tip of our left middle finger and rest these two hands palms up in our lap. Doing so will help our subtle energies to gather at our heart wheel, which despite this illustration is actually horizontal like a frisbee or a poker chip or a nickel. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return, lead tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.